Hey, welcome to Motherhood Equipped, where faith, wellness, ambition, and birth all come together to equip moms to lead with courage and unshakable purpose. I'm Brigitte. I'm so grateful you're here, and I'm committed to learning out loud and living my motherhood journey on purpose right alongside you. So let's link arms and step into all the potential that you already have. Hello. I have on the podcast today my dear friend, mentor, and adopted grandmother, Eunice Ray. She is very, very special to my family as initially the catalyst that led us towards the deeply rooted faith that we have now. And she's also someone that I go to routinely when I want advice that only years and years of wisdom can give, which is why I wanted her to come on and chat with us today. Eunice, thank you for joining. I am wondering if you can introduce yourself in a way that, this is a big ask because you've done so many things, but in a way that paints a picture of the many different hats you've worn over the years.
Well, thank you, Brigitte, for that very lovely introduction. That's quite an accomplishment to have hopefully a witness that would lead others. I think that's kind of what this life is about. I began early. I'm the oldest of 7. So that's kind of a rare thing these days. There's nothing like siblings to humble you and prepare you for life in general. So I recommend motherhood and siblings a lot. Was the first to leave and began, I dabbled at college. I did about 3.5 years. I studied fine art because I thought, I'll be an artist. But I realized I was short on that Pablo Picasso kind of thing. So I wasn't willing to suffer or, starve for my art. So I began to photograph, which was really my medium, actually. I liked the black and white, and I liked film, and I loved the darkroom. And I leapt onto a magazine potential. City magazines were huge in the early 80s, late 70s. And I helped a person who came back from Washington to start a city magazine in Louisville, and where I live. And I knew they would need photographs. But I went in and I realized that advertising and publishing and marketing I had an affinity for that. I liked looking at what people would be interested in and why. And so I ended up running that magazine and left and began my life as a wife and mother, and had 2 children who are self-supporting and don't live on my sofa. And I have 6 grandchildren, and I'm delighted about that. And in the interim, them packing along with me, I have done many, many things and building layer upon layer upon layer. And I always wondered if I was just too fragmented, or maybe I should find something and just, invest. But I realize now that each one of those opportunities equipped me with something else. And I think the Lord was definitely involved in that. No question, whether I recognized it or not. And now looking back, hindsight's 2020, and we spend most of our time looking in the, rear view mirror of life and not in the windshield. But now when I reflect, I realize that I've been very blessed and prepared, hopefully, for His service in wherever He has planted me. So, yeah, I've done many things, and I think that my greatest joy in this life is to be used of the Lord to His purposes, even when I don't want to. And that's been often. But it turns out the best for me. So that's my short, too long bio, Brigitte. So thank you for asking me to
really good.
wax about where I came from.
I didn't know about the photography, actually. Did not know about that.
And children were my greatest. If you talk to somebody long enough, they finally, all the masks are removed, and you finally see them. And that's when, I would not put any film in until then, because you waste a lot. Then it wasn't digital. You were shooting film. And so, it takes a while to get to know somebody is the moral to that story,
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I think I've got some questions for you, a lot about motherhood, a lot about faith, a little bit about wellness. The first one I want to ask is, I think something that a lot of young moms have a hard time with is you just sort of get stuck in the thick of it, and you're just going one day after another. I think it's hard to sort of lift your head up and look at the big perspective, to zoom out. And when you're in the thick of motherhood, to zoom out. And I would like to ask you if you could help us zoom out and realize the importance of what moms do on a daily basis, especially from a faith-based perspective, because I know you've personally encouraged me in that a lot. How would you explain that, the importance of what moms do on a daily basis?
I don't think you could almost measure it. Motherhood is beautiful and rewarding, trying, frustrating, can really bring you to a brink physically and even spiritually, but it is the most rewarding thing in life. I think it's total fulfillment for a woman, and I know that's probably going to rub people the wrong way, but at this age, I don't care. It's just what I've seen. You watch people and you think, gee, she needed kids, or whatever, to make it so that it's not too thorny a subject. I think motherhood is nothing short of a national security issue. I think that a mother produces, populations are incredibly important. Population decline is a surefire way to extinction. Having population, number one, and number two, a population that is steeped in the morals and values and what's important in our society is critical to its ongoing thriving and existence. And so mothers wiping noses, changing diapers, and getting up in the night and doing those kinds of things, it's very intense when they're small, very intense. And you think, oh my goodness, it's almost like taking care, it's almost caregiving with someone who's older. I mean, they just need so much because you're thinking about everything that they're doing. I need to get ready for this, they won't have that. So you're constantly on. Mm-hmm. And you lose a sense of yourself in that. And I think that is being engrafted onto them. That part of you you've lost is now them. Mm-hmm. And if you look at it that way, instead of like, wow, here I am, I'm just nobody anymore. And we used to sit and cry over our kitchen sinks and say, we're not fulfilled. And if we could just be jet pilots, it would be great. That's so not true. And I'm lived to see it. We were told, I'm the boom generation, and we came out of college in the 70s, and it was roaring, it was sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And you could be anything you wanted to be. So you went out to, trip the light fantastic and be whatever you wanted to do, work outside the home. Nobody worked, nobody would admit to motherhood. And that was very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. For us, because it's you're sort of naturally inclined there. I hate to tell you, most women, not everybody's meant to be married, but if you are and children come, then they must be cared for and they must be equipped for life. So motherhood for me is one of the noblest occupations, callings, and sits right next to fatherhood because they're both equally important. Mm-hmm. Heard a comment yesterday that mothers see children as they are and fathers see children as they can be and should be. They're looking into the future for them. We're making sure that their clothes are clean, their noses are wiped, all those kinds of the tyranny of the immediate. We've got to take care of this. But men have that wonderful potential for vision and can guide us. And because we're busy taking care of the nest, I hate to make it sound like a little duck or something, but we're busy focusing on the ducklings, and they're saying, we're flying here. This is where we're going. This is what and that looks so much more exciting sometimes than what we're doing, wiping that little grimy face and giving a big kiss with, but it is such a wonderful rhythm. Mm-hmm. If you get it right, then children see the beauty of what God intended, the genius of it, if you will, or the infinite practicality of it. And making a home that is safe with a father who protects primarily and then provides, and a mother who nurtures is, I think, what God intended, and I think it's throughout his scripture, in every way you look. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he'll not depart from it. That's my favorite scripture. It's like the guarantee, okay, you little, and you think he's not going to do this. And the defiance comes later. Ooh, sometimes, not always, but there are those. There's always one. And you think, okay, I gave him everything I could. And then you get to your knees and you pray so that that child will not depart from what is in fact intended for him for life.
That's so good. That's really beautiful. Made me think about, I think it's Jordan Peterson. One time he described that dance between a mother and a father and the different roles they play. And he echoed similar sentiments about how a mother's role is to do the here and now, nurturing, caring. And a father's role, I think the way he phrased it was, a father's role is to seduce the children into adventure and risk taking. And he was talking about that in the context of how difficult it is for a mother to intentionally place their children in, you know that you're eventually sending them out into a world full of unknowns, which is maybe a little bit more of a comfortable concept for a father. Whereas for me, I'm like, I'm quick to jump. That made me think of that. I also really love what you said about just losing yourself as a mom. I'm going to remember that now on a daily basis, probably, because that has it's all over social media. Oh, you're losing yourself as a mom, go try a workout class or whatever. And it's all worldly things to fill in a hole. But I love that phrase of you're losing yourself, but you're imprinting it on somebody else, because that has a lot of purpose behind it. And that's deeply fulfilling to think about it that way. I think right now with Russell, I hear him my oldest, I hear him say phrases that I say, and I think to myself, wow, there's a little mini me walking around right now.
Be careful.
I am, but that's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
I'm teasing you. Yeah, you're imprinting. I always thought, don't know how much time we have here, but my husband was a Marine like yours, and he was very highly decorated, and he had ribbons across his chest, and men could look and they could read those ribbons and knew exactly. We, on the other hand, I was involved in a quilt project, and when sewing and quilting were proper virtue and industry for women, that's what they did, The bed, instead of wearing ribbons and decorations on their chests like men, we decorated our beds, and of course they shed blood in protecting. We shed blood in bed, and for birthing and for all of the things, and we care for the sick. I mean, a bed is a very important, so we'd make our beautiful decorations for our bed. And I was astounded. And you see the difference. I mean, we're still, and my point is, we don't have memorials like stone to mark that this was a great and difficult feat and blood was shed. And we have little people. The Lord gave us the most beautiful part of that. They're little people imprinted with everything that is important, but they live and they breathe. They're blood and breath memorials to God's greatness and goodness and what we did. And though we may not be highly recognized or have all these, motherhood is a very small audience. It's very small. And so a lot of times you think, well, I have more to give. I could be on a bigger stage. But what you don't realize is, as you launch that little arrow into the future, those stages, you're multiplying it's exponential. You're multiplying all the stages and throughout generations that you will have a presence. And for me, that is so much more impactful and beautiful than thinking, I'm missing it. I'm being overlooked, and I have so much more to give. Not right now, pal. You just need to mind your knitting, do what you need to do to prepare those little people. And the dividend is so much greater. The applause, there is no applause that can show the appreciation that those people have for you. And it's in a smile. It's in a look, it's when they graduate or when they make the team or when you kiss them goodnight. That's all the applause you need. I think, I went for the applause. We all did in our boomer generation. We wanted a bigger stage. And I can tell you, it wrecks homes because moms, just so you know, don't tell the dads, but we are the cog. We're the main hub of the wheel. If we're not there, the wheel doesn't roll. I just hate to tell you. So you take it's a thrill, actually, because they need to know from you where things are. How does life arrange? Well, that's you. And, the old saying or the old adage is, he's the head, you're the neck, wherever don't miss that, so we don't sell yourself short. vital to this whole enterprise called life.
That's beautiful. I want to actually piggyback off of that, the cog in the wheel, and
The hub.
Yeah, how vital a mother is to the wellness of a home. Just because we were talking about this right before we hopped on, I would love for you to share about the impact that creating a healthy home and pouring into a family as a mom has on the health, the literal health of children. Because I thought that that was really amazing and such a, again, a reminder that what you are doing on a day-to-day basis, even if it feels like you've cleaned the floor for the 50 millionth time and you're just like, oh my gosh, so when is this going to end? It really is impactful. You just might not see it.
Well, health in a home, we used to say cleanliness is next to godliness. Well, the ordering of the home, knowing where the socks are, knowing where your shoes are, getting the basic fundamentals of life is taught by a mom. And the eating times, knowing that it's important to sit down at a communion. If you look at a meal as a communion instead of here's a snack or here's a this or that. In other words, don't denigrate it. Here, we're going to eat. We're going to get together. We're going to commune, okay? Which means we're going to talk. We're going to check out each other. That's been lost. When I was a kid, you had, there was no other place to eat, for number one. There was no DoorDash and there was no restaurant that anyone went to. You ate at home. You went to the grocery, and the grocery had a few aisles. There was a bread and a milk, dairy, eggs, and meat, and maybe some cans, but no bags, okay? So you would go in and you get the food, and you'd you'd have lunch and breakfast and dinner at home. And people sat down at the table together, okay? That was a very precious time, and we've kind of lost that. It's a great way to kind of stick a thermometer in the temperature of your family to see how everybody's doing, and you can tell. And feeding them foods that you trust. In our day, Brigitte, especially in yours, convenience foods, I remember TV dinners. That's kind of the first thing. Oh, I just wanted a TV dinner. I thought it would be so great because it was not mom's cooking, and it was different and it was so exciting. And then it evolved from that, or devolved, if you will, to these, convenience foods that have no nutritional value at all. And we now have that food pyramid, which is absolutely upside down, okay? And people don't understand that their guts are wrecked by it, which is your second brain. And people understood that, Brigitte. Your great-grands understood how important that was and how food needed to be simple. The Bible calls it the ordinary and necessary foods. You need the ordinary and necessary. And so much of what we eat isn't necessary.
Right.
And the body, I could go on and on about this. So you've really opened a can of worms with me. For example, fasting. Who knew? I've discovered fasting over the last 5 years. And not because it's a kind of a thing that people do now, intermittent fasting, whatever. Fasting is actually biblical, and it is a restorative and a healing process, which is huge. Because in your body, the Lord put it there so that if you give your body what it needs, stop giving it what it doesn't need, and then give it a rest, like at least 12 hours from dinner to breakfast. That's why we call it breakfast. And then if you go on with, you will find that there is healing in that. And because every cell in the body is pro-life. It's meant to live and to restore itself. That without medicine. That's the healing. That's the restorative. That was such a shock to me. I was so thrilled to know that because God made it free. So much of that is free. And you don't have to, you really don't have, eating healthily isn't expensive.
Right. Yeah.
It's pretty simple stuff. And it takes a mom to plan that, to put it together, and to make sure that her children are not distracted and their tastes hijacked by foods that aren't really food. Yeah, they make them happy and you can give them a little, it's like feeding a chimp, yeah, you send them that doesn't work. I think that's the other thing. You're creating patterns that go for a lifetime.
Right.
And you think, honestly, we'll get through this. No.
If we really were to go down a rabbit hole, it does, I think, it starts when you're pregnant. or even before that. But I do wish that more moms understood that you do have the opportunity to create these patterns. You had the opportunity to, taste buds are very malleable. And I don't see myself as depriving my children when I choose to not give them fast food. I am setting the patterns, like you said, that last a lifetime. I would say I'm a beneficiary of that. You know, my mom, she raised me so healthy, and I lived and I had fun things, and I never felt deprived once. And to this day, I genuinely think it's so much easier for me. And growing up, I just was never even interested in pizza because she hadn't laid that groundwork for me to want to be addicted to that.
Well, a pattern, if you get your life into patterns, and that's what life is, okay? If I know, then I am freed to think of the higher things, the more important things. But if I can't find my socks and I can't find my, and I don't know what's, if life isn't already settled and patterns established, then there are tremendous distractions for the fundamental things, which should be settled and done, So mothers have the opportunity to set that pattern so that that child, that young person can begin to engage life at higher levels and deal with the things that are, and also be well and not frustrated and anxious and all the rest, because those foods do that. Those junk foods do frustrate and make us anxious and depressed, actually, particularly the sugar addictions that are overwhelming. And so I have a couple of truisms, Brigitte. I think you're onto them. I think you must homeschool, just saying. If you want to avoid the bunk and the reworking, later, homeschool is really simple. And here's why I think it's important. Children are known, a child, even by a young child, by its doings. You can watch a child and you'll see this one has an affinity for this and that and all the rest. And you create that, allow that child to express the gifts that God gave them and to be resourceful and do the work and do the study on the things that He has created them to do. Somebody said the other day, we have jobs and we have a position, and what we really needed to do was find a person. As a matter of fact, it was Rory Sutherland, who's a vice president in Britain of Ogilvy and Mather, and he said, we've got all these positions, but people have unique qualifications and unique things about them, and we need to find out who they are and then see if we can make a job that fits them. But it's reversed, okay? And only a mother who notices a child by its doings can begin to foster that. And there's a little book I would recommend that you all get. It's called Obvious Adams. And it's about a guy who has nothing to recommend him or anything else except that he did, through intuition, which is a spiritual capacity, was able to see the obvious in his work, having done the work. He wasn't well educated. He wasn't, Ivy League. His family didn't have great means, but he could see clearly. And when given the opportunity, and he fought to get the opportunity, he rose through the ranks and became tremendously successful in his field of endeavor, greatly satisfied and all the rest. But he went to discover who he was and what had been given to him. We don't do that now, Brigitte. That only happens when a mom, in those early years sees, this one is an efficiency expert, drives me nuts. And this one over here is full of whimsy and wonder. And this, just the different types of children and what makes them each unique. And I think that's why I'm such an advocate for homeschool, because you're fearfully and wonderfully made. You are completely unique. And it takes someone who loves you deeply, only like a mother, to put up with it, to let you get where to express and come to terms with what you were made to do. What a gift. What a gift. Only a mother's love, would do that. It's not and so, yes, mothers push. I was a pusher. I think it's important to let them have adventures. I'm a little more masculine about that, I think, Brigitte. But try yourself out. It's okay. Make a mistake and fail. And if you fail, you will learn. I can't prevent you from that. That's life, and it breaks your heart to watch it. But oh my gosh, how rich! Yeah. And But I, have a great appreciation for motherhood. I didn't understand it when I got into it initially. I do now. I've seen people who are really good at it. I've seen the products of their efforts, and it's really blissful to watch and to experience. And I have done that. And if you miss it on the first go around, don't despair. There's always grandchildren. And then you get to really do, you really get to express yourself. So the Lord is full of hope for us, and full of mercy and reclaiming the days the locusts ate. And if your kids are in public school, don't worry about it. But know one thing, your job is much more challenging because if you're a Christian, you are confronted in a secular situation. They are putting into that child where he came from. And where he came from, whether it was evolved or created or wherever he came from, determines where he's going. Fundamental questions are critical. So you just have to make sure they get that separate standard, and that other standard, and reinforce it at home. It's a lot of dinner conversations and kind of explaining and teaching and so forth. But yeah, I don't think it's a dead end. I just think the challenges are very much greater. Yeah. And I think you get a different, Charlie Kirk talked about that. Homeschooling kids used to be the real dorks, just so you know, because I homeschooled. They were dorky and they had no friends, were socially, inept. But turns out, now that the crop is now, we can see the generation. Charlie said that, the homeschool kids are going to be the leaders. And that is a challenge always to the status quo. And believe me, the supporters of the status quo are out there in force. But you can break through that, and you'll do that with your children.
Mm-hmm. No, that's such a beautiful reminder, I think. It's nothing but encouraging to think about what a privilege it is to be that one person who does know your child through and through, has that gut instinct that I think takes a little practice to learn how to listen to, but once you do, it's really worthwhile. I think I want to ask you a little bit more of a broader question. So not just, I think, motherhood specific, but maybe womanhood specific about the Proverbs 31 woman. I think I've had conversations with some people who think, oh my gosh, that's just impossible to aspire to be her. And I think, well, I think it's a pretty high standard, but I don't think it's impossible. I would love for you to explain everything she embodies, maybe in today's terms, because some of it's a little hard to relate to. But if you could paint a picture for her and how we can aspire towards adding more of her character into our lives, that would be, I think, really valuable.
You have to think about her time, okay? And not that it's changed. Human nature doesn't change. Our circumstances are a bit different. Same thing, though, going on. For her, there is no convenience foods. There's no refrigerator. There's no laundry. There's no washer and dryer. She has to have people help her to do those things because home was an enterprise. It's an marriage is economic. And there's a relationship. And, here's the deal. What's the deal? Well, you run this house. And, make sure we have something to eat there. He brings home the deer. She makes sure it's, processed so that they can eat it. In other words, she has people who help her or she does it all herself. But the Proverbs woman has understood the brilliance of bringing in people who probably needed to have a place. And for that, they had things that they can contribute to her enterprise of home economics. And the whole mission was for her to be able to manage that without having to say, well, honey, can you do this? No, he was down at the gates. And what that meant was that's where judgment was. That was where immigration was. That was where all the affairs of state and their living, was. And he protected her. He saw about the things that were good for their area, all the rest. And the more prominent he was, the better that was. But the point was, she managed home. He managed, the affairs of state and the economics of making sure they were provided for and protections. It doesn't matter if you've got something to eat if they're going to come right after dinner and raid your place and kill everybody. And that was a real concern. There was not 911. There was not, you have to think about it. But fundamentally, the roles are the same. She takes care of the home, runs that, says, okay, I got this, okay? And for that, he is able to go and do what he must do at the gates. She's also enterprising. It's not like she, just waits. She has, she's a buyer and seller. She, knows. She is understanding her economic position, but her base of operations is that home because supervision is continuous. She's raising children, managing staff, people who needed a place. She's provided for that. She prays with them before. They know the team. They know what they're doing. And he is doing his part, okay? And it's kind of funny, when I was growing up, telephones were, everybody, they were on the wall, by the way, if some of y'all don't know that. You didn't carry them around. And there was one, and it was in a strategic location, and everybody had to, remember that we had one phone, and often there were other people on the party line who were in the neighborhood who were also on your phone. So, but anyway, women would have, when they answered the residence phone, it would be Mrs. Bornstein's residence. And when they called his office, it would be Mr. Bornstein's office. Okay? Right. There was, even then, and it's not been that long ago, but it's very long now for you to look back and imagine that. But that, for me, was drawn out of that Proverbs 31. Her dominion was home. Mm-hmm. His was outside of that, okay? And she said, I've got this covered, and I've got, I can even buy and sell and contribute, and we can go on, even if you are taken out. That was the bond in the deal. You see, it's very different, but it's very much the same. And I still think the model works and is better, At my age, I want to tell you something. All the women who say, he's retired and he's home, what am I going to do? I can't get anything done, and we laugh and all the rest. But it's kind of true, because that's not his spot, And even in town, and when I was a young mother, there were men who would, after they retired, would rent an office in the office building where they worked, so they had a place to go every day.
Right.
Because they wouldn't stay home. Okay, so and I'm not advocating for that or saying that's good or bad. I'm just saying those are patterns that are hard to break. Mm-hmm. And the pattern in the Proverbs 31 woman is that she is much more capable, and maybe she doesn't need staff now because you have a washer and a dryer and you have all these things that were not available in those days. But it still means she runs that.
Right.
So that's, when I ran my household, when my husband was alive, he did not do things in the house. Okay. Mm-hmm. That was my job. But I also didn't do the things he did. That was his job.
Right.
Okay. And, you sort of get those figured out and you keep your part of the deal, because life is, there are not contracts, but a covenant, and you're all in. But you have parts of it that you do, and the children are part of that. Yes, he has a part in the children, but in their maintenance, I think that's basically our job. And, wiping noses, changing diapers, all that kind of stuff. And if you're sick, that's great. But I always like to have somebody who helped me to do that. Mm-hmm. But that's just me. I think you work out your own style and arrangement, but never lose sight of the fact that your domain, rightfully and traditionally and historically, is the home, because you're naturally suited for that.
Well, and there's so much to respect about that in the way you describe it. I think, right now I get all the comments of like, you hear, oh, you're just a stay-at-home mom, or you're just a this, or there's this trend right now of the trad wife, or these videos of just a mom at home making bread. And there's just so much that just belittles what you just described. The Proverbs 31 woman to me sounds like a kick-butt CEO of her own machine that is well running and firing on all cylinders and going in a ton of different directions. I think she sounds awesome.
Yeah.
And also
she is
very impressive and doing a lot of things and having ambition and things. So I think that's really beautiful.
So what do you think drives that diminishment? What do you have a thought about that? because it is it's kind of like, well, isn't that cute? But
Yeah.
why do you think that, why is that why would you diminish that? Who would do that?
I mean, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me, right? Because one of the first answers you gave me to a question was how critical mothers are for national security, which is like a very bottom line
So
need.
think about that. Because in our day, they belittled motherhood as well. Okay? And homes were broken. Divorce became common. We now have a family court system, which we never had before, because it doesn't work. And 25% of the cases that go through the court system here are family court. In other words,
Wow.
it's a disaster, okay? So when they kind of go, isn't that cute? Well, remember, it's a national security issue. So if you're looking to diminish a nation, literally, you diminish the mothers and the fathers. That's the principal building block of a Western civilization, of a family, is the idea that a mother and a father will stand. One can chase 1,000, two can chase 10,000. There's power in that double knot. And when that happens, then it becomes almost impossible to take over or to diminish us in any way. Freedom is built on that. And I cannot tell you how important I think that is. And it bothers me because I've seen what happens when you diminish motherhood. If mother ain't happy, ain't nobody happy, right? So that's really the truth. And
Yes.
so she carps and is not good. Just be good about it, because you are not only a great American, but a great mother is a great American. I don't care if she breaks bread or not. I can't eat the bread. It makes my backside too big. I'm too short. But I don't, those are just, whatever they want to do. But don't get carried away with the crafts and all the rest. I'm taking care of the landscaping. I'm making sure the garden's grown. That is what really helps to make the boat float.
Right.
And if you can make bread in your spare time, then great. When the quilters, one of the things about Owensboro, Kentucky, was they had beautiful quilts. We collected quilts from all over Kentucky. I was in a quilt project, 19th century Kentucky quilts, which kind of in the 1800s, that's the movement west. There's a lot of people coming through the Ohio River, and the Ohio quilts were beautiful. And that's because the land was rich. And the women could come off of the fields and get into the houses. Few of them got addicted to cocaine, not enough to do, just remember, because of coke and all those kinds of things. But eventually they were able to come in and make beautiful quilts. And we found some of those beautiful quilts in that part of the country. And of course, the Ohio River was delivering wonderful silks and other fabrics. The mountains, the quilts were used up. It was poorer. And it was cold, and so they were using the quilts, and you saw the different types of what women were able to do and tell the history of the state through that. But again, it's proper virtue in industry, and women were close to home, because that for us is where the action is.
That's so beautiful to think about everything that way. I have one last question for you.
Okay.
I think it's easy to hop off a podcast where you've listened to this and just feel like $1,000,000 as a mom. You're like, okay, I understand my purpose. I know what I'm doing. I know why I'm doing it. This is amazing. And again, just be full of purpose. But the world is noisy, and there are a lot of distractions. There's a lot of comparison, opinions, pressure from different directions that aren't necessarily the right one. And I would like to ask if you have any practices or rhythms that have helped you or can help us stay grounded in what truly matters, and just stay aligned with God's voice above all else and shut out all of those distractions.
Well, of course, stay in the Word. Start your day. You notice the Proverbs 31 lady starts her day, with her people praying, all that. And I think it is important to stay in the Word and to learn from it, apply it with all your wisdom. Wisdom is Jesus Christ. You get wisdom from learning in the Scripture, but then you're looking for understanding. Please don't look to others who are not also guided by that Scripture for guidance, okay? Or application, which is understanding. I understand now this concept, I'll apply it here. I think it's very important to not, I think social media I would be aware of that, okay? And I'm trying to think of it. what would have been, we read magazines, looked at the pity pic, the glossy, we still had that same thing. This is how you're supposed to look. And Playboy influenced a lot of young women. You look at them and you can see their whole, they've been to the doctor to be able to look like that,
Mm-hmm.
So fashioning yourself, robing yourself in righteousness seems maybe a little dull. Gosh, because look at so-and-so, she's got that, and they just moved into there, and they're going on this trip. And, right. So focus on yourself and the Lord and what he's looking to teach you and give to you. I would probably limit. I don't know who's promoting. I know one thing. In the publishing world, which is what I do, someone pays the pressman, okay? I may make the flyer, but someone's paid me to do that. So what goes on social media, someone is being either paid or probably paid, but there's a force behind it, okay? It's either a spirit or a financial incentive, something. Do not get entangled in those because it's not benign, it's going somewhere. And it may look like they're going on a trip, but, or they're doing this. Who are you encouraging or discouraging? If you're on it, is your life a discouragement to people or an encouragement? I think it's more important to not, words for me are more important than images. And images is what social media is about. Make no image. Ponder that. Because an image allows you to infer many things. Well, they probably have it better than me. And oh my gosh. And all of a sudden you're eaten up with failure and lost opportunity, FOMO, whatever they call it. And so it doesn't help you. So right. Read your book, read your scripture, read those who've come before. And here's the last imparting thing, Brigitte. There is no new thing under the sun. Nothing. Mm-hmm. Nothing. It's a replay and a repackage from what happened the time before. And I've lived long enough now at 76 to know that's totally the truth. And, you all look at Facebook. We looked at, Vanity Fair or, 17 or whatever the magazine was. And they came every month and you read the stories, all the stuff. It's the same influence, same. And most of it is meant to help you to part with your income and your money. It's looking to sell you something or somehow get you to move in a different direction. Move only with the Lord. And I will tell you one thing about that. The person who teaches their kid, there is no new thing under the sun. And the kid that gets onto that fact and begins to look at what's been so he can say, okay, this is where we're going and what's happening. Mm-hmm. That person gets to the head of the class first, has the most successful, in my view, the most successful run of this life. And I do believe that the patterns are there. Look for them and repeat them, because in those settled eternals is life. They're the eternal things. Nothing changes. Not really. And so you can watch, Betty Bimbo over here in her pants that show everything she's got. And you're like, what is she doing? And then she goes, oh, somebody looked at me in the wrong way. I'm like, well, stupid.
Yeah.
So anyway, believe me, I've got many opinions. My husband always said she's frequently in error, never in doubt, though. So anyway, I try to keep that in mind. I think you all are doing a great job. I'm very impressed with much of it. I think you've opened up to the idea that you have tremendous power as women. Power we lost because we didn't understand it, okay? So I think that it's really, I'm very hopeful. I'm hopeful to see this next group of kiddos too, how they turn out and where they go. And I don't think some of our institutions are going to serve them. So I encourage you to examine that. The food, the medicine, the law, the education. Examine it all, because what's happening now, it's going to take some leadership, even from home, to begin to take that ship and be that rudder that moves it into a better direction. But you all have got that, and I'm looking forward to seeing it. And for my grandchildren to see it too, because they'll see it when I don't,
Yeah.
They'll live in that world, and I'm very, very hopeful. So, Brigitte, thank you for having this tea time with me.
No, thank you. Thank you. I really feel like you did just what I asked in the first question. You have expanded my personal view to be thinking not just about what I'm going to do with the kids today, but for their whole lives, and also into an eternal perspective. So I'm really grateful for that. And I feel just really, I think everybody's going to feel really encouraged and really, I think this word's overused, but empowered in the sense that what we're doing is really important. And there are a lot of voices that say it's not, but it is really, really important. So I'm super grateful for your time. I am going to link to some things. I'm going to link to your Substack. Eunice is one of the most beautiful writers I've ever read, and she actually edits my Substacks for me. So a few other things as well. And thank you so much for your time, Eunice.
It's very, very pleasant to be with you always. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening to Motherhood Equipped. Remember, you don't have to have it all together. You just have to be willing to bet on yourself and then trust the Lord every step of the way, walking boldly in the purpose He has for you. I remember very vividly searching for my first podcast related to motherhood when I was in the depths of postpartum after having my first, and I would have never found the encouragement I needed had the podcast I found not had enough reviews to show up in my feed when I searched. So I'd love to ask if you would pass this gift along to another mom needing encouragement and leave us a review so that we show up in other people's feeds, and also just share this with one friend who comes to mind. Thanks so much.